Vecna, the Whispered One, Master of Secrets, Lord of the Spidered Throne, a despotic tyrant, an Arch Lich that, along with his powerful lieutenant Kas, once dominated much of the lands of Greyhawk. However, at the height of Vecna's rule, Vecna's lieutenant Kas, armed with his powerful blade, forged by Vecna himself, struck against his master and, in the titanic battle that ensued, both were destroyed. So great was the devastation that when the dust had settled, all that remained of the vile Arch Lich were his hand and his eye, both powerful artifacts that some say could make the wielder as powerful as Vecna himself. All that was left of Kas, his magical sword. At least that's what the legends say, but the truth of the matter is frequently something else entirely, and thousands of years later, something stirs, something has awoken, something so evil and vile that it potentially threatens your world. Will you stand against it, adventurer? Do you even have the might to do so, or is your world doomed to fall into the living hell of Vecna's evil? Coming right up on RPG Retro Reviews. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel RPG Retro Reviews. I'm Captain Courageous and I review old school modules and games and try to give them a fun and informative analysis. This week I'm taking a look back at the 1990 release of the super module Vecna Lives, written by D&D luminary David Zeb Cook. Spoiler warning, this video is a deep delve and analysis of the module, and if you'd like to play it, then I highly recommend that you have your DM watch this video, as I will be giving away the module's secrets as well as quite a few helpful tips on how to run it and avoid some of the module's many design flaws. That said, if you're still with me, let's begin. Dave Cook was employed with TSR for 15 years and author of such notable TSR classics as the D&D Expert Set, Planescape, Star Frontiers, and was lead designer for the second edition of the game. First appearing in original D&D supplement for Eldritch Wizardry, the Arch Lich Vecna was a creation of TSR founder Brian Bloom. Bloom created two artifacts, the remnants of an evil Arch Lich named Vecna, who had been destroyed long ago and only his hand and eye remained. Not much detail is given on the evil Lich other than he had a bodyguard named Kas, and Kas's sword also appears in this supplement. Vecna is an anagram of Vance, the surname of Jack Vance, the fantasy author whose Dying Earth series inspired the D&D magic system. The hand and eye of Vecna themselves were inspired by similar items from the works of Michael Moorcock that appear in the Eternal Champions series, the hand of Quill and the eye of Ren. The hand and eye of Vecna and the sword of Kas would appear in the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, as well as the second edition supplement, the Book of Artifacts, and here it is suggested that Vecna's spirit still remained within the hand and eye. Vecna Lives has a sequel released in 1998 titled Vecna Reborn, and that in turn spawned a sequel in 2000, Die Vecna Die, that together potentially form a trilogy of adventures. One of the more delightful aspects of this module is that it is a world-spanning epic, and Dave Cook takes the time to expand upon the world as a whole and the ancient magics and legends that underlaid Gary Gygax's vision of the setting. Also notable here is how much more lore about Vecna is presented. The details of Vecna's religious cult are provided, its hierarchy and game stats, and backgrounds for the NPC leaders. Also finally revealed and described in detail is the Circle of Eight, a group of powerful mages residing in the city of Greyhawk, founded and led by the arch-wizard Mordenkainen, whose membership included other Dungeons & Dragons legendary wizards whose named spells appear in the D&D game. While the membership has varied over the years, the roster in this supplement include Bigby, Dwamage, Jalazari Salvarian, Nistel, Ataluk, Otto, Rari, and Tensor. This supplement also significantly expands on information for the city of Greyhawk, the Viscounty of Verbobonc, the Gnome Warren of Osnabralt, and the stone circles of Toveg Barago. One major error here is that Cook gave an entirely new description of the city of Verbobonc, which is a direct contradiction to the description given in the adventure module WG8, The Fate of Istus. When asked about this, Cook was quoted, "What can I say? Oops." Verbobonc also plays a major role in the classic module T1-4 Temple of Elemental Evil, which description is the official one has never been resolved. So, with all of that background and lore in place, one would think that this adventure would be one of D&D's greatest, but unfortunately there's quite a bit of failure in the execution here, which I'll address as I review each chapter. As I go over this adventure module, rather than adding my Dungeon Master suggestions at the end of the review, as I normally do, I'll be adding them during each of the chapter overviews. There's a lot of supplemental material here. The background and stats for the Circle of 8 are given, as well as all of their henchmen. It's pretty significant. There's background information on how each henchman views the others, and the henchmen themselves are interesting characters in their own right, and it is suggested, due to the deadly nature of this adventure, it might be best if the players don't use their actual characters, but these henchmen instead. Honestly, I kind of hate this sort of thing. It's an adventure for characters of the 11th to 14th level of ability. For one, it's really difficult to jump into the skin of a character of this level if you've not played and grown them through actual use, and two, this module will surely take several months of gameplay to complete. That's a long time to put a pause on your regular campaign to play. But that is not the worst offense this module commits. The opening here is so egregiously bad that I think it just might be the worst I've ever seen in a commercially produced module from TSR. Essentially, in the prologue of the adventure, the DM is encouraged to pass out character sheets with the stats for the Circle of 8 and tell the players these particular characters are needed to complete a special mission of great importance. A great danger threatens all of Greyhawk, and these powerful wizards are the only ones up to the task to investigate it. Through various divination spells, the source of this threat comes from a forgotten mound in the Cron Hills west of Greyhawk. This cairn before them is connected to, but not the source of this danger. There is a variety of questions the players could ask at this point, and the module offers a variety of ways to answer them, but always being vague and a bit cagey on the exact details. The reason for this is because upon investigation of this burial mound, the circle will stumble upon an interred creature, Halmadar the Cruel. Halmadar was and is in possession of the hand and eye of Vecna and became very powerful. However, his subjects conspired against him, and as such is the way of evil artifacts. In his time of greatest need, the artifacts failed him, and he was drugged and buried alive and sealed in this mound. In the centuries of his imprisonment, Haldemar has fully succumbed to the influence of Vecna's hand and eye. He no longer remembers who he was and believes that he is Vecna. This is a trap for the Circle of 8, luring the most powerful wizards in Greyhawk to their doom. The DM is told to slaughter the lot of them without mercy. This is 100% a railroad. Death of the Circle of 8 is a foregone conclusion, a part of the adventure, and nothing the players do will prevent this. The so-called reasoning behind this is to instill the horror of the evil power that has arisen, as it has slaughtered the Circle of 8, which were characters of much higher levels than those the PCs will later use in the module, their henchmen. In my mind, I just don't see this going well. It's entirely possible that some or all of the players just get up from the table and tell the DM to stuff this stupid adventure, or if they remain, the DM has now destroyed any credibility, trust, and rapport they may have had with their players. So my first bit of advice here, if you're going to play this adventure, is to ignore this silly nonsense altogether. There's no need for it. The crime of this module is its setup, and it sort of tears down a lot of the good things that it contains with this horrible opening. First of all, to me, this dark, evil threat that to this point is unnamed and unknown can serve as a great finale adventure to an ongoing campaign. I see no reason to not use the actual player characters. Yes, it's terrible when a character you've played for a long time, possibly for years, dies, but that's the nature of the game. Death is a possibility at any time. And second, if you're playing this module as part of your ongoing campaign, then I would suggest that you begin sprinkling in certain elements from the very beginning. For example, introduce the Circle of Eight or their surrogates early on in your campaign, possibly in the role of quest givers. If you have the City of Greyhawk box set and you are running this in the world of Greyhawk, perhaps establish the nature of the government, the importance of the Circle of Eight, and so on. This should be a staple of your campaign from the beginning. If you're running this in another setting, such as the Forgotten Realms, you could easily change the particulars. For example, change out Greyhawk for Waterdeep, for Verbobonc to Neverwinter, change Mordenkainen to Elminster, and change out the Circle of Eight for the Harpers. Then, when you are ready to begin this phase of your campaign, you can simply say in passing that the Circle of Eight has gone off on a mission of great importance. This might just be an in-passing comment and shouldn't be all that unusual, as the wizards are known to do such things, though all at once might strike the players as a significant detail. Or not. It depends on how much attention to detail your players pay to those aspects of your campaign. However, what will be significant is that when the PCs learn of the deaths of all of these powerful individuals, well then, now we're off to the races. And piquing the interest of the players and stressing the danger of this unknown threat will be accomplished, but without destroying all your credibility as a DM. In Chapter 1, A New Beginning, the players are now supposed to assume the roles of the Circle of Eight's various henchmen, with each player taking the role of the henchman of the Circle of Eight member they originally played in the Chapter 1 opener. The chapter opens with each of the characters getting a vision of their patron's demise at the hands of the Vecna imposter Haldimar, thus sparking off the adventure proper. As an alternative, if you elect to make this part of your regular campaign, perhaps by this point in their careers, the PCs can fill the role that these henchmen do in the module, or at least they've been on enough missions for the Circle of Eight to maybe justify them getting these visions instead. You could have one or all of the various henchmen in the module as friends of the PCs. Perhaps at some point they've gone on adventures with the PCs or any number of connections beforehand. Furthermore, these henchmen make great replacements in the event that PCs do die during the course of the adventure. In addition, if you use your regular PCs for this adventure, you can completely sidestep the potentially time-consuming aspect of getting the various henchmen together, who, in the module, barely know each other. Regardless, the big takeaway from the vision is that they are to seek out Mordenkainen, the leader wizard of the Circle of Eight. Once again, as part of an ongoing campaign, surely the PCs will have heard of Mordenkainen, or if this is the Forgotten Realms, you could easily substitute Elminster, or even the Black Staff of Waterdeep. The module has the PCs going to the Guild of Wizardry in the City of Greyhawk in order to find someone who knows how to contact Mordenkainen. Ultimately, they come in contact with Kieran Jalusian, an apparent love interest of the mage Jalazari. Given the news of her death, he takes it pretty hard, but he points the PCs in the right direction. He is in possession of a ring that will allow him to contact Mordenkainen. Furthermore, he reveals that high-level divinations have been failing all over the Flaneas. A meeting at the Rock and Elephant, a tavern in the City of Greyhawk, is arranged, and we move to Chapter 2. I'm not exactly sure why the move to the tavern is arranged other than to allow the attack of Vecna's forces to occur later on. The module assumes that the PCs might split up for their searches about the city and thus have to regroup later. Either way, I would just say that Kieran needs to consult with other members of the guild and then to meet at the tavern later. Regardless, Kieran's ring allows the PCs to essentially make a Zoom call with Mordenkainen, with his holographic form appearing at the table as if seated there, and an open conversation with the legendary wizard can take place. In the end, Mordenkainen will order the PCs to investigate the deaths of the Circle of Eight, which is something they probably would have done without Mordenkainen's prompting anyway, but the wizard does add knowledge of his own to the events that are unfolding, that they have something to do with the legendary artifacts the Hand and Eye of Vecna, and some type of astrological alignment. He also says that the divination blackouts are spreading to other parts of our Earth. Thus, he wants the PCs to find out what happened to the Circle of Eight and report back. This concludes the meeting, and from there, as the PCs leave the tavern, they are assaulted by members of Vecna's cult. This encounter underscores the difference between running this as a one-off adventure break from your main campaign or as actually part of your regular campaign. It's entirely possible that during their earlier adventures they might have come across the cult. Thus, its attack here could be confused as to its purpose by the PCs. Either way, the cult itself is pretty creepy. The members go by various titles denoting their status: the Fingers of Vecna, which are the cult's minions; the Blood of Vecna, which equate to the cult's most fanatical and eager to die in the service of their master. Then there is the Eye of Vecna, a 7-foot-tall monstrosity, a human whose head is that of a giant eye. Its elaborate robes embroidered with eyes. Its fearsome power is to consume souls with its gaze. Then there is the Hand of Vecna, and this monstrosity is a human whose head is that of a giant hand. To make this even more terrifying, I would describe it as a desiccated clawed hand. This is a wild and nearly uncontrollable warrior meant to fight for the cult. Both of these entities are created by the priests of the cult through vile and terrible rituals. Thus, this encounter will be difficult and potentially horrifying. However, the PCs are high enough level that they should emerge victorious. All the cult members wear a talisman around their necks of a hand with an eye at its center. Chapter 3 is probably the most interesting and enjoyable parts of the module. Here the PCs have free rein to go about their investigation, retracing the researches of the Circle of Eight in many cases. Splitting up here has many advantages. The more scholarly of the party can hit the libraries and temples, while the more worldly can hit the streets and try to shake up the riffraff and see what falls out. The module wonderfully details the City of Greyhawk's locales. If you have the City of Greyhawk box set, as DM, you will be in good position to flesh out any missing pieces, as the PCs can go and do as they wish here. Just as an aside, the City of Greyhawk box set is available for print on demand at DriveThruRPG for just $19.99. In addition, there is a Stranger Monsters sale going on with everything Mind Flayers, Demogorgon, and Vecna on sale. And for this sale, all of the Vecna titles are available on print on demand. You can get the entire Vecna trilogy in print right now. Vecna Lives, Vecna Reborn, and Die Vecna Die are all available. Links for everything is in the description. Once again, if Greyhawk has already been a major part of your campaign to this point, the players will most likely already be familiar enough with the city and, based on their experience from previous adventures, have a pretty good idea of what places to visit, what NPCs to talk to. In this way, the adventure can be a lot more immersive and rewarding. There are a few pitfalls and potential traps along the way, depending on what the PCs do. Regardless, at this point, the PC's research should lead them to either the Viscounty of Verbobonc, where a cult of Vecna is said to reside, or the Gnome Warren of Ostenbrot, where a mysterious item of great value is said to reside that might help them in their cause. Further, while the module doesn't exactly address it, there is a third option the DM can introduce here, and only if the PCs take the 2 to 5 days it takes to wade through the rather scholarly gazetteer, The True Relation of the Nire Dive and the Land Surrounding, by someone named Norful van Deflitter. The author's frustrating divergences of topic make the work difficult to navigate, but this tome of legends and tales of Greyhawk can tell the tale of Halmadar the Cruel, and even tentatively locates the tomb of Halmadar with a sketch map, and this page shows signs of being recently traced. Thus the PCs may desire to seek out Halmadar's tomb. This isn't exactly covered in the module, but is a great opportunity to include a detailed site-based adventure, which this module sorely lacks. Here is the map of the burial mound from the prologue. As you can see, there really isn't much to it, but it could serve as the basis for a more expansive tomb exploration. Of course, Haldimar is no longer there, but certainly it is now overrun with wraiths and other foul undead. This is supposed to be a module of horror after all. Perhaps after uncovering Haldimar's tomb, the rotting corpses of the Circle of Hate could be found, horrifically being feasted upon by ghouls. Not only will this provide a great side quest, but also will put to rest the burning question as to what happened to the powerful wizards. Let me also take a moment to talk about the various books described in the Library of Greyhawk. There are a total of 11 books detailed in the research chapter, and the descriptions give the books a character of their own, and in my opinion are one of the highlights of this adventure. In addition to being interesting and in some cases rather amusing, this gives a DM a great example on how to include such voluminous tomes in their own campaigns. The PC's researches and investigations will most likely lead them to the river quarter, where they may meet and pick up a peg-legged guide NPC named Torum Vorostek. What the PCs don't know at this time is that this relatively harmless-looking NPC is actually Vecna in disguise, but more on that later. In addition to all of this, the module does a decent job of adding some time pressure to the PC's quest during the Interlude chapter. Spells begin to fail, divinations of 5th level or higher don't work, contact outer plane fails, astral and ethereal travel fail, and priests discover their granted powers are getting more difficult to cast, and it's harder to contact their deity. The sky turns dull gray, the sun and the stars are not as bright. The PCs better unravel this mystery fast. Chapter 4 details the logistics of traveling to Verbobonc and Osnabrück. Overland travel would be too time-consuming, but the PCs will learn that the Rene, nomadic peoples, sail from Greyhawk to Verbobonc through the Nire Dive and its connecting rivers, and will have no trouble finding passage to that city, which also will lead them quickly to other parts of Greyhawk they wish to go. There are several potential ships listed, and each one provides pitfalls and challenges depending on the player's choices. There is also the requisite wandering monster tables provided as well. Chapter 5 sees the PCs arriving in Verbobonc. Their goals here can be to learn more about the gnome warren of Osnabrück and continue their pursuit of the Vecna cult. Finding the cult here will not be easy for a number of factors, but the most important is that this city played an important role in putting down the Temple of Elemental Evil a decade ago, and thus their suppression of evil religions is understandably very authoritarian. Thus, if such an evil cult exists here, it's been pushed deep underground. There is an opportunity to get involved with some of the city's political intrigue, and that in turn can help them uncover the information on the cult they seek. It can bring them to the attention of the cult as well. This chapter provides a lot of information in the various ways the PCs can continue their investigations, and surely the DM will have to improvise depending on what they want to do. Given the cult's need to remain hidden, there is a trap they set as the PCs go about the research. A tip leads them out of Verbobonc, where they have been set up for an ambush by Vecna's cult. Ultimately, however, all roads lead to an inn called the Scythe and Sheaf. It is here that the cult in Verbobonc resides, but there is a twist in the works. The risen Haldamar the Cruel, who in his delusion as possessor of the eye and hand of Vecna believes himself to be the true Vecna conducting rituals and such, and it is upon one of these the PCs arrive. There is a lot going on here, especially if the PCs employed the assistance of the priest of St. Cuthbert or the Watch. A dramatic battle will surely ensue at this point. During this chaos, the peg-legged Rene, Term, reveals himself and strides to face the Haldamar Vecna imposter. It is here that Term is revealed to be the true Vecna. He recovers his hand and eye and destroys Haldamar and taunts the PCs as he vanishes, beckoning them to a place called Torvag Baragu. Chapter 6, Aftermath, gives the details of Torvag Baragu, which is essentially Greyhawk's version of Stonehenge, but on a much grander scale, which contains magical properties that seem to allow for travel between planes of our Earth and even other times and places of existence. Just as a side note, Torvag Baragu is detailed in the Greyhawk Adventure Supplement, but it is not needed to play this adventure. With a bit of research and inquiry, perhaps with Mordenkainen, the location of the place can be discerned. Located in the dry steppes far to the west and beyond the Crystal Mist Mountains. Thus their next destination seems apparent, but there's still the matter of the mystery of the gnome warren of Osnabrück. It's entirely possible to bypass visiting the gnomes, but it would be to their detriment, for the item that awaits them there may be key to defeating Vecna. Chapter 7 sees the PCs finally arriving at the gnome warrens of Osnabrück, only to find the place devastated and the gnomes in disarray. The victims of an attack by a lone individual of extreme power, they are understandably distrustful of approaching strangers. However, If they can earn their trust, the PCs can discover the thing the gnomes have kept hidden for centuries, the Sword of Kos. After a few trials of endurance and character, the sword can come into their possession, and after that, another entity enters the story. The half-fiend Cambion demigod Ayuz. Realizing the threat to his power, Ayuz has learned the existence of the Sword of Kos and wishes to claim it for himself in the upcoming final battle. Given the state of the gnomes, Ayuz is not expecting strong resistance and has sent subordinates to accomplish the recovery of the sword for him. While a challenge, Ayuz's forces should be no match for the PCs here. The High Priest of Ayuz, Baron, will most likely seek to ally himself with the PCs at this point, given their power, but if Ayuz cannot wield it, then better to have a proxy to wield the blade against Ayuz's enemies. Chapter 8, Across the World, sees the PCs finally making their trek to Tovig-Baragu, where they must face Vecna directly. If they have consulted sages or Mordenkainen, combined with what they know of Tovig-Baragu, they may have an inkling of what Vecna has planned. This, the PCs probably believe, is the place of the final confrontation with Vecna. But there may yet be surprises awaiting, but first they have to get there. The trek overland will take between 43 and 49 days by horseback, depending on the route they choose. They might also fly. If the players are clever, they might just be able to beseech the elves of Selene to assist them in their quest. Surprisingly, this isn't discussed in the module at all, but given that they are in the Kron Hills, Selene is basically right there. They could either fly or even teleport. Due to how the standing stones of Tovig-Baragu emit a powerful aura, they will still arrive several miles from their intended destination. Traveling via the plains is a big mistake. The path to Tovig-Baragu through the plains is controlled by Vecna, and he will cast them to the edge of the negative material plane and his citadel of horror, Cavitius, which lies in the plain of ash. Finally, in Chapter 9, Tovig-Baragu, the PCs arrive at the Standing Stones. The Inner Circle Stones show many scenes through time and space. There is ancient Flan, the horrific Daraka, the capital of Ayuz's empire, and Vecna has the gate open to keep an eye on a potential enemy. There is Citadel Cavitius, and finally the Empire of the Whispered One from the ancient past, just before his defeat at the hands of Kos. In the distance, the palace of the Spidered Throne can be seen. It is through this gate that Vecna must call to his ancient followers, and there gathering them forth and bring them to the current time. Their sheer number will elevate him to demigod status, and he'll be able to activate his world shield, shutting off the rest of the gods from their clerics. Vecna will become the most powerful being on Earth. It is here where they find Vecna, still in his peg-leg term form, and now the so-called final confrontation can begin. This module also makes Vecna undefeatable here. Regardless of their actions, the PCs end up cast through the Cavitius Gate. Once again, terrible module design where the actions of the PCs have no bearing on the scene. And of course, I think this is a big mistake. A simple change here. Make Vecna a fearsome foe, but defeatable. He probably can legitimately defeat the PCs, but there should be at least some chance. There is a good twist here as well. The Sword of Kos doesn't work against Vecna. This shouldn't be too much of a surprise. Vecna did forge the sword for his lieutenant after all. Why would the Demi-Lich make a sword that could defeat him? Vecna should gloat about this, laughing at the PC's ignorance. But other magical weapons will work. There's also a great role-playing opportunity with this scene. In his role as Master of Secrets, Vecna knows every mistake or dirty deeds the PCs have ever done. No secret can be kept from Vecna, the Whispered One, the Master of Secrets, the Lord of the Spidered Throne. Now is the time for him to pit the players against one another by using their secrets against them. Once again, the big advantage of playing this as part of your ongoing campaign shines through, as surely during the course of play there were some things the PCs did that are hidden in the past that in character the others don't know about. Testing a potion on an unconscious character, stealing treasure, anything they've done to one another. Vecna knows, and now he openly spills the beans or attempts to reopen old emotional wounds, pitting the player characters against one another. The module suggests that Vecna make an offer to elevate a PC to demigod status, but it is totally out of the blue, and it's hard to imagine that someone would actually take Vecna up on the offer without some prompting. If one player seems particularly angry at the revelations, have Vecna offer that PC the power of a demigod if he offs his fellow party members. Play Vecna for the evil, devious bastard he is. Revel in it. It will be glorious. And if the PCs do manage to somehow defeat him here, then fine. This body is just a vessel anyway. Vecna will return. However, most likely, Vecna will simply force PCs through the Citadel Cavitius gate once per round. Have them make a saving throw. If they fail, then through the gate they go. If all the PCs are tossed through the Citadel Cavitius gate, then go to Chapter 10. Citadel Cavitius is Vecna's stronghold. It resides on the elemental plane of ash, bordering on the negative material plane. It is a dreary, baleful place of hopelessness. A massive skull with the upper half sheared off serves as the walls of the place, and within are those that have had the misfortune to oppose Vecna in the past. The area itself is surrounded by a shimmering field which makes the place livable. Leaving the area will probably result in death, as there is no air, and the effects of the negative material plane slowly drains the PCs of their life force. In fact, the border of the shield is littered with the bodies of those that surrendered their lives to the elements, rather than continue the hopeless existence that Vecna had imposed upon them. As PCs walk across this desolate landscape, ash and dust fills the air, choking them. The Citadel, initially seen in the far distance upon their arrival, is the only logical place to go. It is the home to about 1,000 dreary souls, all victims of Vecna's wrath, their spirits crushed by their useless existence. Here the PCs will find a cruel realm where despair and bleakness seems to almost take physical form. They arrived at a bizarre, perpetually cold and dark hell. Upon entering the place, the gatekeeper will inform the PCs of the rules. There is only one truth of the place. Hope is useless. They will, however, be told that Kas of Tassirion resides within the walls of the place, and it will soon become obvious that they must seek him out. The module does a great job of setting the atmosphere here, and there are a few wandering crazy NPCs that can be encountered as the PCs wander about the city. In order to locate Kas, the PCs will have to interact with some of the Citadel's denizens, and the DM can have a lot of fun role-playing these insane people. Examples from the module include the Prophet, who wanders about the streets shouting predictions of doom and destruction, grabbing a PC by the shoulder and screaming insane tirades in his face. There is the Killer, one whose rage against Vecna is so great that any mention of his name causes the NPC to become homicidally unhinged, and so on. Kas can eventually be located, and the real use of the sword can be discovered. The sword has plane-shifting powers, and now that the PCs are no longer in Greyhawk, where Vecna has suppressed those types of spells and abilities, they can tap into the sword's hidden power and leave this hellish place. The warrior has other dire news. Vecna has become so powerful as to only be defeatable by another of similar power. In other words, the PCs are going to have to try and ally with Greyhawk's resident despot and demigod, Ayuz. This is the part where the module really goes off the rails for me. The only way to defeat Vecna is for the PCs to ally with probably the most despicable character in all of Greyhawk. Once again, terrible module design. As an alternative, all the enemies of Vecna are imprisoned here. Surely Kas could have learned of other ways that enemies have tried to defeat the Demi-Lich, those that failed, but also those that came close. And those could be fascinating and offer alternative ways to defeat the Demi-Lich, hidden magic items of incredible power, and so forth. Chapter 11, the final confrontation, sees the PCs return to Tovik Barago using the Sword of Kas. There, Vecna's ritual is reaching its conclusion. In the spidered throne gate, thousands of Vecna's followers from long ago, seemingly hearing the Demi-Lich's chanting, ready to burst through when the ritual is complete. Thousands more have traversed through the desert and encircle the place, chanting praises to Vecna. When combined with the followers from the past, Vecna's power will be enough to complete his devious plan. The final confrontation has the PCs, or the priest of Ayuz, Baron, from Chapter 7, Osnabralt, who may well have been tagging along with the PCs the entire time, call forth for his master, and the battle of the demigods commences. Meanwhile, the PCs are left battling Vecna's crazed followers. As the battling demigods wear themselves down, the PCs must take the opportunity to try and push them both through the gates and into oblivion. Once done, there is a massive explosion that kills many of the followers and effectively ends the battle. Expelled, probably unnoticed, through the gates during this fiery blast and into the sounds of the desert, the hand and eye of Vecna. Chapter 12 deals with the aftermath of the events of the module, including what happens if Vecna wins, and there are 5 appendices giving stats for the artifacts. The module includes Vecna's stats, new monsters, NPCs, and pre-generated characters. Cover art for this module is by the Venerable Jeff Easley. Interior art is by Ken Frank, and the cartography is by Steve Beck. Getting a copy of Vecna Lives has never been easier. The PDF is available from DriveThruRPG for just $6.99, and as of the publication of this video, the print on demand is on sale for $14.39. Quite the bargain considering how ridiculous the prices are on eBay for the original. I have this print on demand myself, and it is top notch. The ink is dark, the page is thick, and a nice semi-gloss sheen. This will last you for years. As you can see by these pictures, it just looks great. The PDF is high quality scan, so you have one of the older scans with the faded look. This is definitely worth getting. So, let's go ahead and take a look at Vecna Lives on my D20 scale of style, presentation, and value. Let me preface this here that this rating is going to be based on the actual contents of the module as intended to be run, rather than its potential as a resource for a long-running campaign. Style-wise, this is your standard TSR late 1980s super module design, coming in at around 95 pages. All of the cartography and interior art is serviceable, but this is not the best this era had to offer. This is also an early 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons module, which means it lacks any significant site-based exploration locale. I'll rate this a 15. The presentation is where this module fails. Let me preface that with the fact that there is a lot of good here, which I'll go over in a moment, but the execution stumbles. The opener, which has the PCs take on the roles of the Circle of Eight only to be railroad slaughtered, is probably one of the worst things I've ever seen. The finale, where the PCs are essentially relegated to observers while Ayuz and Vecna duke it out, is also rather anticlimactic. Then there's the final chapters where the path of the adventure becomes pretty much a linear railroad. Is also not that great. With all of that said, there is a ton of good here. If you would like to run a campaign where, at the end, the PCs face off against Vecna, then this module is an invaluable resource. There are many NPCs that logically would show up in the campaign's early adventures, especially if you start your campaign in the city of Greyhawk, or even Waterdeep if you're running in the Forgotten Realms. The ranks and stats for the Cult of Vecna, the stats and capabilities of important artifacts such as the Sword of Chaos, the Hand and Eye of Vecna, and their detailed histories are provided. Vecna's history and background, also a great read. The details on Verbobonc, the gnome warrens of Osnabrück, the standing stones of Tovig Baragu, Vecna's Citadel Cavitius could all be helpful when conducting your own campaign. I even like Vecna's core plan of cutting off the gods' power to reach their followers, thus elevating Vecna to the supreme power in the world is devious. However, I can't help but think that even at their most lackadaisical, at some point the deities would take notice of this and try to take some sort of action to oppose the Demi-Lich. Perhaps they already have by sending followers in the past powerful artifact weapons of their own, something that the PCs could learn about from Kos while they are trapped in Citadel Cavitius, and thus, taking a cue from Marvel's Infinity War, use the gates of Tovig Baragu to gather such weapons from the past, perhaps aided by the gods they have revered during the campaign. In this way, Ayuz isn't needed at all. The PCs themselves, armed with artifact weapons they've gathered from the past, face off against the Demi-Lich in a final confrontation. Now that would be an epic campaign. But as the module is written, the PCs fight minions on the sideline while the real battle is fought by somebody else. For that reason, I'm going to rate this a 5. Finally, let's talk value. I'm rating this strictly on the print-on-demand version, as I think I've made it pretty clear I do not at all recommend you run this module as written, but use it as a resource for your own Vecna-centric campaign. In that respect, I think there's a lot of value, especially if you are buying the PDF or print on demand, not collector's prices on eBay. One has to weigh the value of the actual cost of the thing, its resource value, and the time taken to modify its contents to make this the playable epic it should have been. I know a lot of people sure enjoyed this module in the past, and for that you can thank your DM. Honestly, I was greatly inspired by the material, and I definitely got my imagination going. Thus, my value rating is going to be a 13. That brings my overall rating for Vecna Lives to an 11. Above average. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you found this review useful and enjoyable. My video output will resume its once a week output this month, and I'd like to take the time to thank all my patrons who make this channel what it is and these videos possible. Thank you so much. Next week I'll be taking a look at a much requested review, Module N4 Treasure Hunt. Please give this video a like, comment, and share. Please check out my Teespring store for great gaming swag, t-shirts, carry bags, coffee cups, and more. Join the channel's Facebook page, RPG Retro Reviews. Consider supporting the channel by becoming a patron yourself. Or alternatively, you can just send a tip through the PayPal tip jar. Link is in the description. And as always, my friends, may your D20 roll true and game on.